Hey, today we're going to talk about three different choices or three different reactions we might have when confronted by biblical truth and how that impacts our life. Hey, I'm Mitch with Keeping the Vows. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And we're here to help people to discover and maintain a Christ-like marriage. There's three different choices, I believe, that when you're confronted with the biblical truth of what we can do. You know, do you think it's hard to know what God's will is in your life? I think sometimes it's not so hard to know what God's will is. We could pick up the Bible and just find it. But the problem is in the Lord's Prayer, it says, thy will be done, meaning God's will be done. But if we pray that prayer, we're saying, okay, God, I want your will done, even if it goes against my will. And that's where it gets difficult. Don't you hate it when you read the Bible and God's right? And don't you hate it that it happens all the time? I do, right? God doesn't ask us to give up anything that won't kill us, either physically, morally, or spiritually. God only asks us to do things that are going to enrich our lives, to make us better. Jesus said, I've come to give you life and give it to you abundantly. That's what it's all about. So the three different choices that we can have when we're confronted with the biblical truth, and I've seen this a lot in counseling. The first one is indifference. People just don't do anything. They just go, well, yeah. One guy says, well, yeah, but you know how I get around that? And I said, stop. I just gave you a biblical truth. I don't want to know how you get around it. God doesn't want to know how you get around it. It's not important. When people say, and I tell them the biblical truth, and they say, yeah, but, I tell them, God doesn't want your but. He wants your obedience, you know. I don't tell it to everybody, but if I know him and I can get by with it, I do. God doesn't want your but. He wants your obedience. He doesn't want you to say, yeah, God, I know it's best to do this, but I'm going to do this. So the first one is indifference. The second one is anger. Some people just get out and out flat angry when you tell them something that's biblically true. You give them good biblical advice. They just get upset with you. And then the third one is they can actually change. So the first one is they can have indifference, they can get angry, or they can change. And when God speaks through his word, our response of those three things exposes our spiritual maturity. If we're unconcerned with God's word, I'm indifferent. If I'm proud and God is not on the throne of my life, then I get angry. But if I'm humble and allowing Christ to be on the throne of my life, then I change. So I go from unconcerned to so I enjoy reading books by counselors, and one of the things I really enjoy is this, how frank some of them are, how sometimes they just lay it out. And one of the things about counseling is, I mentioned it before, but some people need just this much of a nudge to understand, and some people you could hit them in the head with a sledgehammer. I mean, my wife Kim, you could just touch her and say, hey, honey, do you think maybe this? And she'd sit and listen and go, oh, yeah. And she would rationalize it and she would figure it out and she would try to do whatever she thought, whatever she felt God was telling her to do. That's good. But the next person, you could hit them with a sledgehammer and they're still not going to get it. They're still not going to get it. Well, part of being a good counselor is, first of all, knowing the difference between who to nudge with a fingernail and who to hit with a sledgehammer. And the second thing is knowing not just who to do that to, but having the guts to do it. And I've been told that one of my best things in counseling is that I have the intestinal fortitude to tell people the truth. I'm not afraid to tell them the truth. If I tell them the truth and they leave and don't do it, then that's their responsibility. I can't help people that don't want to be helped. So I enjoy reading books by counselors, and sometimes they are just so crazy honest. It's just crazy. And so some people get put off, though, when you're honest. They get offended. And I'm going to tell you a story today about a lady that came into my office and was offended. So a lady came in and she wanted to get married, but her boyfriend was an alcoholic, and she told me that I have my notes, that he was verbally abusive when he was an alcoholic. But they wanted to get married, and they were living together. And so I coached them about moving apart. He didn't really seem very interested in it. And also, he was an alcoholic, and so I told him, I said, he needs to get plugged into Celebrate Recovery, or AA. Celebrate Recovery is AA that is Christ-centered. AA can be a higher power. One guy, his higher power was the Budweiser cheerleaders, which he fell off the wagon 3 times. They asked him to get another higher power, okay? But in Celebrate Recovery, Jesus Christ is the higher power, so that's why I usually recommend that to people. But anyway, this guy, I told him, so you need to go for that for 6 months. You need to be alcohol clear for 6 months. Then we'll sit down and talk about the possibility of marriage. And so they agreed they would do that. The very next morning, I got an email saying that they decided to get married in just a few weeks. I think it was on something like Christmas Eve at the church, and we have a lot going on anyway. But they wanted to get married at the church in just a couple of weeks. And they weren't even going to have time to do their counseling in that amount of time, much less the whole alcoholism thing. So I emailed back and explained, hey, maybe you had a misunderstanding. I thought this is what we said. Well, what I got back was a lot of venom. And that's all right. I can handle that. And so then I was a senior associate pastor and counselor at the church. So then the lead pastor got a letter, and the lead pastor just sent me a letter, an email, and said, hey, what's happening here? And I sent it back and told him what happened. And he goes, okay. So he sent her a letter and said something like, you know that we're all about loving people. When people come in the door, we love them. That's what we're about. So we love people as they are, and yet we care enough to tell them the truth. So why would a pastor of 30 years suggest to you that it would be good to wait and not get married right now? And that was the gist of his letter. And I had also told her as much when I said, you know, you can get married anywhere you want. Just at this church, you have to go through my counseling to get married, and you don't have time to do that, so you can go get married. You just can't do it here. And that's what had made her upset. Well, she got upset, said she's leaving the church and all that, and so that's okay. And about 6 months later, I got an email from her, and the subject just said, you was right. That's a quote, you was right. And it told in there about how that she has a temperament that when she wants something, she goes for it. And when she goes for it, she'll just run over anybody that's in her way. If there's something she wants, she doesn't care what the consequences are. She'll just run over anybody to get what it is that she wants. That's her temperament, her personality. And I figured that out already. But anyway, in the letter, she goes on to say that that her boyfriend was in her apartment, and he got really, really drunk, and he took her handgun and took his own life with it. And some more details about what happened and all that. But in the end, it just said, thank you for trying to protect me. Thank you for trying to protect me. So in the beginning, I was giving her godly counsel. I mean, I was, doing the right thing to put together a solid Christian marriage based upon biblical principles, but she didn't want to hear it. But at least in the end, she did come around in the end and say, hey, I realize this is who I am. I realize that I made this mistake. Well, it's easy for us to do that. When we get confronted with biblical truth, what are we going to do? What is it that we're going to do? Some people get what they want in their mind, and they're just not going to change no matter what. And I just think that's something that each of us needs to look at. Do I really want my way, or do I want God's way? Like I said, I hate it that God's right all the time, but he is. The only thing Kim and I have done well in our marriage is bend our knee to God. That's the only thing we've done well. When God says something, we bend our knee and we do it. That's just what we do. That's just who we are. It's what we become. So why don't people want to change? Well, aside from mental health issues, some people just believe they have a better solution than God does. And I believe this is tied to our real belief. If Jesus is the Lord of my life, then I will look to God for wisdom. I will realize my true strength is in learning my purpose and learning how to navigate life's many issues with the understanding of God and understanding that God has the answers. But if I won't bend my knee to God, then I can't be distressed about the consequences that come my way. Hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you so much for watching. Check out our blog at keepingthevows.com. We have a lot of things there and a lot of help aids too on our resource page. Please comment, ask questions. We'd love to do that. We'd love to get those things answered. Please hit the like or the subscribe button if you would, and have a great day.